I'm trying to decide if I want this light off because this seems too dark, but this seems too light. It seems like too much light in this one, but this also seems like the better shot, so I think I'm gonna go with it. Today we're gonna talk about something that's really interesting to me: time travel. Not really sure why I whispered that. Anyway, I specifically want to go over a few different theories of how time travel would work or play out if we were to actually be able to do it. But first, I think that it's important that we get an understanding of what exactly time is. So for that, I've got my laptop here with me because I'm not going to be able to remember this quote and I want to say it right. According to space.com, Einstein thought of time as a fourth dimension. And quoting them, space is described as a three-dimensional arena which provides a traveler with coordinates such as length, width, and height, showing location. Time provides another coordinate, direction, although conveniently it only moves forward. I'll leave a... Hey, quiet down in there, I'm trying to make a video. I'll leave a link to this article in a card that you'll see right now, as well as a link in the description of this video. The article is really interesting and it goes over a ton of theories and works of how time travel could really be possible. And so if you guys are interested in like every little tweak and knob of that, and maybe hear about some certain scientists and stuff that are behind a lot of the things that I might talk about in today's video, I would just go read the article for yourself because it's pretty interesting and I love time travel, so yeah. However, I am not actually going to talk about how we could pull time travel off in this video because I'm not a physicist or a scientist, and frankly, any math that gets too complicated just hurts my brain. So rather, I am here to talk about what I think is the more interesting and creative aspect of time travel, and that is what would happen if you did it. I'm sure there are quite a few different theories, but I'm going to talk about a few of the most popular and most known theories in this video. For this, I'm going to be pulling from another website, for which I will also leave a card and a link down in the description below, to astronomytrek.com. In this video, I'm going to cover 3 different types of paradoxes, and then I'm going to go over some solutions for each of those paradoxes to explain how they could work if we were to be able to time travel, so that paradox aspect of it isn't really there. However, know that I did not come up with these solutions. Mine's way greater than mine did, and you've seen these solutions and paradoxes in multiple movies or cinema that I am actually gonna try to reference to in this video to give you guys a better understanding of what exactly I mean when I'm saying it, because some of these can be really confusing and I think an example might help out a little bit. The 3 paradoxes that I'm going to cover in this video are: 1, the grandfather paradox, which is probably the most known and most common paradox that you hear people talking about. The second is going to be the ontological paradox, and the third, which is my favorite because, well, you'll see, is called the predestination paradox. So first up, the grandfather paradox. So like I said, you've probably heard of this one, and if not, I'm still gonna go ahead and explain it. And it basically means that if I were to travel back in time and kill my grandfather, you know, kill him, then I would end up never being born, which means that I would never be able to travel back in time in the first place to kill him. And so it's kind of like a never-ending loop that just keeps going, and well, you kind of see how that wouldn't work. This paradox is present in the Back to the Future movies, if that helps at all. Luckily, the site that I was just talking about gives us a few solutions for the paradox itself. So the first solution that I read is basically called the timeline protection hypothesis, and it basically says that if I were to travel back in time to try to kill my grandfather, there would be like an invisible universal force that would stop me from doing it. I could try anything, like the example that it gives on the site. If I were to try to shoot him with a gun, well, not myself, that makes no sense. If I were to try to shoot him with a gun, then it wouldn't work. It would just jam up. Or any other means that I try to kill him, it would never prove fatal. I could cause things to happen to him, give him scars that he might talk about later in life, or talk about how the guy that tried to kill him was just really unsuccessful. But I wouldn't be able to kill him, and ultimately he would still give birth to me, and I would still go back in time to try to kill him. But when I did, it would never prove fatal. The other hypothesis is one that you're probably more familiar with, and that is the multiple universe solution, or the multiverse. It basically says that if you were to go back in time to try to kill him, then you would create a new timeline where you did kill him, but you never existed when you travel back to the future. So you would kill him, but your entire life would be gone. And there would be the timeline that you originally came from, where you're still born, but you would just poof, be gone one day. And that's because you traveled back in time, and you wouldn't exist in that timeline anymore. You'd exist in the next timeline that's parallel. Crap, I need to find a better way to explain this. Spoilers for Avengers Endgame. Spoilers for Avengers Endgame right now. Avengers Endgame actually uses this solution in their form of time travel. The only real difference is that in Avengers Endgame, they travel back to the original timeline that they came from, so nothing ever actually changes in their timeline. But in the timeline that they create when they travel back, everything changes. The stones are missing, they were taken by their future selves, and everything is now changed in their universe. And that's actually why Cap took the stones back in the end, so that they could try to mend the timeline a little bit. All right, the second paradox that I'm going to discuss is called the ontological paradox. It basically says that if I were to go back in time and give someone something, then that something would have no point of origin. It would basically just appear out of nowhere. A good example of these would actually be like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure or the Terminator movies, except Keanu Reeves seems like a more hotter topic at the moment. I don't know. You're breathtaking. Basically what it means is that if I were to travel back in time and gave myself the idea to make this video, for example, then I would have gotten the idea from my future self, who got it from my past self, who got it from my future self, who got it from my past self. See how that doesn't work either? Luckily, I didn't get it from my future or past self. I got it from my friend Alex, and that's way more baller. No, it's not. Don't say that. Oh my god, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Anyway, the article that I linked explains how to do this with a person as well, except with a person it's a lot more complicated to kind of comprehend, and I don't think that I'd really be able to explain that well enough without like an animation or something else that I don't know how to do. So I actually recommend that if you're curious as to how that would work with a person, you just go read the article and look at it for yourself, because that's complicated. But for the most part, if you want to save some time, it's basically the same thing. It's just more complicated because you're talking about a person instead of information or an object just appearing out of nowhere. The only solution that I could really find for this paradox though is the multiverse solution that we talked about in the last paradox, but for that to work I would still have to have originally came up with the idea in my original timeline. So at that point there's really not a paradox anyway, which I guess is the point. And the only other solution that I could come up with, the only other solution that I could come up with for this paradox is actually the next paradox, which leads me to my third and final paradox that we're going to talk about. Good segue, Josh. This one's really similar to the last one, except it really doesn't even have a paradox at all because it makes sense, which is why it's my favorite. This is the predestination paradox, and it basically just says, wait, why don't I just show you? Alright. Kind of low here. Here, let's raise it up. Alright, that's a little bit better. Alright, so now we moved to somewhere else in the house, and I'm gonna show you why. Alright, now we've traveled back in time. The predestination paradox basically says that if I were to travel back in time, I would inadvertently cause the events that I'm trying to change to happen in the first place. For example, if I were to open and shut this drawer really loudly. Hey, quiet down in there. I'm trying to make a video. Nice. Good examples of this form of time travel include Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and, well, one of my personal favorites, Lost. The only real problem that I could find with this one is that you don't really have free will, per se. It's kind of like your fate is locked in place, and for the most part, that's kind of true. For example, if I were to go back in time and try to stop myself from making this video, I would somehow, some way be causing myself to make this video, or at least failing to stop it from happening. The results of this that gives you the most free will would actually be for you to be able to go back in time and change whatever you were trying to stop in the first place. But if that were to happen, that's when a whole nother paradox comes into play, because then you wouldn't really have anything to go back in time and change in the first place. Which is why the most likely result would be that you would fail or cause the events to happen in the first place. See? Time travel's simple. I actually like this one the most because it makes the most logical sense and it involves only one fixed timeline. If you go watch my short film, Hindsight, shameless plug, card above you, link in the description, you'll actually see that I use the same form of time travel in that short film. So a character is inadvertently causing events to happen while trying to change them. So that about wraps that up, but some other time travel paradox solutions that I came across on the website and just kind of in general include one thing called the erased timeline hypothesis. And basically that means that whenever you travel back in time, the timeline that you came from is erased. It's gone, just disappeared. And the one that you go to is the one that you'll be in from now on. And so basically it allows for only one timeline to exist. It's just not the same one that you left from, like in the last paradox. The only problem with this solution is that, like many of the others, it really doesn't solve all of the paradoxes that could happen while time traveling. But even then, I would like to think that this is the solution that happens when the Flash travels back in time, because if not, he is leaving a lot of Cisco's, Caitlyn's, and Iris's just standing there waiting on him to never come back. The other solution to time travel paradoxes is simply that time travel isn't real and it's impossible, and that's because of all the paradoxes. It basically makes it impossible to travel back in time because things don't logically make sense, like the consistent moving forward of time that we have. And even with solutions to those paradoxes, we don't know what we have and haven't discovered yet. There are probably more paradoxes that we haven't even thought of, which I guess in itself is a paradox, because in the sense of the word, anything that we don't understand yet is a paradox, and yeah, it just gets complicated. That being said, maybe one day the things we know now as paradoxes won't be. But until then, as far as I'm aware, if you were to time travel, that's basically what would happen.